Yeah. So, yeah. Now we are on like a live, live on YouTube as well. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just I want to give a heads up. PODs.
So can you see?
Yeah. Now we are on like live, live on YouTube as well. Yeah, yeah. Just I want to give a heads up. PODs.
So can you see?
Yeah, I'm able to see. Yep. Yeah. Now we are on like live,
There is an echo now.
live on YouTube as well. Yeah, yeah. Just I want to give a heads up. Okay, 1 minute. Its echo is coming. 1 minute. Okay. 1 minute. Let me mute. Yeah, I'm able to see your screen.
Okay. You see
Yep.
it says H1b program under Biden administration.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. 1 minute. Mohan.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Namaskar.
Hey, Vamshi. So I'm just joining the session. I'm putting the message in all the group.
Okay.
Okay. First, I will put this in our WhatsApp. Listener. Opening now.
No.
Hi, Vamshi bhai. I am happy to announce that our Delaware and Greater Philly, this H1b program session is going on our YouTube channel, our TTA YouTube channel. Yeah.
Hey, Bhaskar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on live now. Hi, Manohar.
Hey, brother. How are you?
Yeah, hi, good. Hi, Akshat. Vamshi is here. Is our no? You will you will start the program. I will first introduce our organization and about your immigration from and about you. And right once at 8:05 we will start the start the meeting. Okay.
Okay.
Hi,
sounds
Akshat.
good. Hi, Vamshi. How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Very good, thanks. We're having a snowstorm tomorrow, so trying to get as much done today as possible.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, that's true.
And where are you?
I'm in Philadelphia. I'm in Chester Springs,
Okay.
near to Exton. You know Exton?
Yeah, I know. Actually.
Yeah, pretty close to Exton.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of Indians in Exton. A lot of IT companies.
Yes. Now it's one of the, I can say it's one of the fast growing location in and around Philadelphia suburbs.
Is Malvern near Exton?
Which one?
Malvern?
Yes, Malvern is close to Exton too.
I know
Ma-
Vanguard is there. There's a lot of projects with
Exactly.
Vanguard.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. Yeah, because of its close proximity to like Wilmington, Delaware, and also kind of close proximity to King of Prussia. So it's becoming one of more like a prominent and due to some good school district like Downington East School District is one of the nicely highly rated school districts in and around area. So
Yeah. Hey Akshat and Vamshi. Our General Secretary Srinivas Manapragada garu joined this meeting. Heartily welcome, Anna.
hello, Srinivas
Hi,
garu.
hello, Namaskaram. Thank you very much for
Namaskaram.
joining.
Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Kamlesh garu, thanks for joining. Really
Sure.
helpful, sir. Welcome, Andy.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Srinivas bhai, this program is going to live now, and the live is started on YouTube as well. Just FYI.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think so slowly people will start joining, I think so.
Yeah. We will start at 8:05. It's 7:56, right? Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
So we're starting at what time? 8 o'clock?
8:05.
8:05. I mean, we'll give like a few minutes for people to join. I think probably 5 minutes or so, and then we can kick off and then.
So Tiwari we have posted it on all our channels. I think so. There will be more participation. Thanks for your time and your patience.
Yeah. No, thank you. This is especially with the new Biden administration. There's so many changes. People have so many questions. So we're happy to kind of help people understand what's going on. Even for us, it's hard to keep track. I mean, every single day there's something new, but we have to obviously.
Absolutely. I think so. Most of the new companies have been erupted because of this administration. New entrepreneurs have come, especially myself also. I have started my own company on, body shopping and other stuff and helping other companies. So it will be, I think so, it will be really informative session today for everyone.
Yeah, I hope so. And, and like I said, there's so much going on, but it's, if you break it down, it's not all that complicated. So it's just a matter of, summarizing and understanding what's happening.
Gotcha.
But that'll be the objective today.
Right.
So let me make you post in case if I lost my connection.
Who, me?
Yeah, to you and moderator. I think let me do that. So. got it. So far 12 people, 12 participants. Let me.
It's 7:59.
Mhm.
I thought, yeah, everybody would be starting to log in around 8 o'clock. Yeah,
Yep.
right around there.
Yeah, I think 8:05 is a good target. Should be
Yeah.
enough people logged in by then. So are people going to be logging in over the phone or Zoom or both? Do you know?
Yeah, we provided all the through over the phone and Zoom and everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have, I think so, it's live on YouTube and Facebook too. So that's what we want to, have more coverage and more people can benefit. Even if people are not attending, they can, avail the recording session on
Session.
YouTube and Facebook.
Great.
Just to give a heads up, Tiwari, because we want to make sure that all the questions have been answered from the Zoom session. Also, there will be some questions coming on other social channels.
Right. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. You can see the screen that I'm sharing also, right? The slide.
Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
We're able to see.
The PowerPoint presentation, yes.
Yeah, normally this time it's more summarization just because there's so many different changes.
Mhm.
Normally what I like to do is I like to show participants the actual rule or text on the screen. I have some of that today as well. So the people that are online, I think it'll help them and to see the exact rule or the exact text. In 1 hour they may not be able to see everything they need to see, but at least they know where to look for it, and they'll get an idea of what it is. So that's the idea behind the screen sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and at times also, I mean, how much over like verbally you would be telling, but people for them probably like, yeah, visual makes more impact.
Yeah.
Like when they're reading it or when they're seeing certain whatever, like I mean, flows and diagrams or some PowerPoint presentation and stuff. It more makes a more impact and.
Yeah, I think that's right. Makes sense.
భాస్కర్ మళ్ళీ ఒకసారి మన జనరల్ గ్రూప్ లో వేసేవా పోస్ట్?
I did actually. Yeah.
Okay, you did. That's fine. No worries.
Yeah.
Hello guys.
Hey,
Hello,
Bharat
Bharat
bhai.
Hey, Bharatana.
Hi
Bharatana.
Manoj, Vamshi,
Hi, Bharat.
Plus,
Hi, Bharat.
Bhaskar, Malik,
Hi.
You got a
Srini,
more
Manapragada.
Hi.
Been a while. I just want to come and say hi. Ante.
wow, nice. So it's so nice of you, na?
Hi Suresh.
Suresh.
Bharat.
Hi, Suresh.
Yeah, I'm here.
Suresh.
Hello, Srinivas. Hello,
Hey.
Vamshi and Bhaskar.
Hi, Suresh bhai.
Hi, Akshat.
Suresh.
Thanks for joining today's call and, helping out the community with all the immigration questions they have.
Yes, my pleasure. So towards the end, we'll have a question and answer session, right?
Yeah, we will.
Yes, we do.
We're gonna, ask the attendees to just post their questions in the chat window, and then towards the end, we'll just go through the questions as we received, and then we'll try to answer as much as possible.
Okay.
I mean, instead of having like an open, maybe it might be a little more organized if they can just send it through a chat window, and then I can read it for you.
Yeah, I think it helps to have moderation, definitely.
Yeah.
Sometimes questions are duplicative, sometimes they're
Yeah.
off base, so I think that helps.
So yeah.
Mr. Akshat, thank you. Like, you helped us a lot, even last year too. Like, you did a lot of webinars for us. Thank you. When I was a president. So thank you for your help. I'm a past president now.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're still kind of in charge, so
Yeah.
that's good. No, it's my pleasure. And I was telling the others, there's so much. There's even some misinformation, especially some of the Indian newspapers. They report on the facts very quickly, sometimes even before the facts are well known, because there's so much interest that it ends up being some disinformation out there also. So I think it's useful to spread information that's correct, and let everybody know what's going on, so they have a better sense of where they're at with their status.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Vamshi,
Agree.
just it's 8:05. Let's start the meeting, right? Just invite all our EC board members, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome everyone to tonight's session on H1b program under Biden administration. Tonight's session is brought to you by Telangana American Telugu Association, a non-profit social cultural charitable organization built to promote, preserve, and perpetuate the Telugu community in US and Canada. This organization was formed in 2015 by billionaire entrepreneur Dr. Paila Mallareddy. To become a member of this organization or for any additional information about our organization, please visit our organization website, mytelanganaus.org. Tonight's session is organized by Telangana American Telugu Association, Greater Philly, Delaware chapter, headed by Executive Vice President Suresh Reddy Venkanagiri, supported by our Board of Directors Prasad Kunarapu, Bhaskar Pinna, Kiran Guduru, and our regional vice presidents and regional coordinators. Our guest speaker today is a renowned attorney, Mr. Akshat Tiwari, from law offices of Kamlesh Tiwari, based in Edison, New Jersey. Mr. Tiwari focuses primarily on employment-based immigration, employment law, and corporate law issues. He is currently a member of American Bar Association, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the New Jersey State Bar Association. He is also qualified as a FINRA arbitrator and has been recognized nationally as an advocate for banking. Hello? Hello, Bhaskar?
We can hear you.
All right,
Can
thank
you-
you. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry about it. Okay. Tonight with us on this call, were you able to hear me from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Thank
Yes. Yeah. No worries. Yeah.
Right. Tonight with us on this call, we also have members from Telangana American Telugu Association Advisory Council team, Executive team, and Board of Directors. I would like to welcome them one and all to this session. One request to all the attendees during the course of this session, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat window. These questions will be answered towards the end of the session. Without any further delay, let me start this program. I would like to welcome Mr. Tiwari. We are glad to have you here today. H1b employment-based immigration are some of the needful topics. Please share your insight on what the new Biden administration and plans are in relation to this. Mr. Tiwari.
You're
Okay, can
on.
everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Vamshi, for that nice introduction. It's always my pleasure to work with Tata. We've done several of these webinars already. As I mentioned, I think it's important to spread information out there about immigration status, because members of our Indian community and other immigrant communities, really need that information. There's a lot of fear, there's misinformation out there, And it's important to spread the word and kind of get people up to speed. And that's one of the things I like to do in my webinars is, we can go into great detail on any of the topics I'm going to talk about, but just to give you the forest, the whole forest perspective, not so much the trees, because people kind of lose track with the details. They kind of want to know, the TLDR. What does this mean for me? And that's really what we like to get to in our webinars. So the topic for today, as Vamshi mentioned, is the H1b program under the Biden administration. So obviously there's much discussion in the news, in media, social media, about all the different changes that have been happening under the Biden administration. These are some of the questions that we'll cover today. I won't read them, they're in the flyer, but we'll go through them as well, okay? So the first thing that's sort of imminent is the H1b Cap, right? So every year there's a lottery, as you all know, for a limited number of H1 visas. There's been some changes in this area as well. So there was a recent rule to convert the H1b lottery to a wage preference system, right? So let me take a step back. So 2 years ago, and for many years before that, it was a first come, first serve kind of system. So everyone filed on April 1st, and there's probably 100,000 to 200,000 cases filed April 1st every year for 85,000 spots. And then based on those filings, USCIS did a lottery, right? And it was a random lottery to select the winners. Last year, they changed it because it was a little inefficient to have that many cases filed when only X percentage of the people are going to get it, usually 30 to 40%. So they changed it so there's a very simple pre-registration that's done in March. Simple biographic information, no LCA, no worksite information, and based on that, just pretty much just the petitioner and the beneficiary information, basic information. Based on that, the lottery is conducted on March 31st. Lottery winners are announced same day, and then all the people that are picked have 90 days to file their full petition. Okay, so that's the system that was in effect last year, the new system. The bottom line is this year, again, the system is exactly the same as last year. Okay, the registration period for the cap is from March 9th to March 25th. As I said, it's a simple registration on the USCIS, my.uscis.gov website. There's no worksite information. It's a $10 registration fee per beneficiary. And obviously it's an H1B, so it's a company that's filing for the beneficiary. And the same rules as before apply to multiple registrations. So, people are very anxious about getting picked in the lottery, obviously. So they're, one person may be going through 4 or 5 different companies, especially consulting companies, and filing through them to get picked. Now that's fine from the employee side because, that increases their odds, but an employer has some liability if they're filing under the registration for the system for someone. Because in the rule where USCIS implemented this new lottery system, they said that you need to only file a registration if you have a bona fide need for the employee. Okay, so it's not, I'm taking $1,000 from this person and filing for them, and if and there's no job available. That's not the system that USCIS wants. So obviously there's a conflict here, right? The employees want to file with many different companies. The employer wants to file only for someone that they know is going to join them, because if you have if you're a big company, you're filing, say, 100 registrations, and say 30, 40 of them get picked in the lottery, which is run March 31st, you should be filing at, probably 80, 90% of those 30 or 40 cases that are picked. If you're not, then USCIS is going to do their data analysis and say, okay, this company filed X number of petitions, Y were picked, and Z were actually filed, right? And that number will naturally go down each step. But if that final number is much less than the Y number, which is the number of cases picked, then USCIS could make an inquiry into that employer, right? So from the employer perspective, it's important to at least protect yourself. If you're filing an H1B for someone, get an offer letter and agreement in writing saying, if I'm picked, I'm going to join you. And if they don't join you, then you at least see how the paperwork. So if USCIS comes knocking, you can say, well, this person told me that they were going to join me. They gave me a writing to that effect. And you're pretty much protected at that point. The other thing is, the same rules applied last year, but intervening factor obviously was the COVID pandemic. So I don't think USCIS really made an issue of anybody not following through on the registrations that were picked. Obviously, the pandemic continues to be an issue this year, so they may be a little more lax this year as well, but I would not assume that's the case. So it's probably best to stick with what I mentioned, which is from the employer side, make sure that you have some writing, some undertaking from the prospective employee that they're actually interested in joining you. One other thing that's important, especially for the people that are on F1 status, there's tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people here on F1 status working on OPT or CPT. And USCIS knows that, and especially the day one CPT program, while it's legal, they kind of don't like that. There was, in the outgoing Trump administration, they had plans for various task forces within immigration to kind of crack down on CPT. That's been disbanded. But even so, you have to be a little careful if you're on F1 status, you're filing a CAP case, and you want to file as a change of status case. Okay, especially if you're on F1 CPT, because if you're filing a change of status, say your case gets picked, your employer files in the registration period in March, right? March 9th to March 25th. Your case is picked March 31st. Now your employer has a 90-day period in April, May, June to file your full petition. So you file a full petition. The question is, are you going to file it as a change of status effective October 1st? Or are you going to do it under consular processing, which means there's no action taken on your status. So if you're on F1 status, you continue on F1 status. But after October 1st, you have the right to go to India to get a visa stamp, H1 visa stamp, and then come back on H1 status. We always recommend for people, especially that are on CPT or that have had multiple master's degrees with multiple OPT and CPT combinations, to consider consular processing, just because it's, you can get some nasty RFEs from USCIS about maintenance of status. Now, obviously with the pandemic, there's travel restrictions. There's reasons not to go abroad to go for stamping. So, sometimes it's okay to try for the change of status. 9 times out of 10, if the case is denied as to status, it's still going to be approved under consular processing. But, it's a little complicated issue. I would suggest if you're filing an H1b Cap case, you check with an attorney about whether it's better to file under change of status or consular processing. That's really the bottom line on that. There's pros and cons either way. It changes over time, given the pandemic, things like that. So certainly if you need to take advantage of the cap gap rule, right? So if say you're on STEM OPT or STEM OPT is ending this year, and you need to take advantage of cap gap, then absolutely you should be filing a change of status. The cap gap rule is also, there's many different combinations, permutations of things that can happen. I'll direct you to this article here on our website, H1b Cap filings for current F1 students. Okay, the URL is here, story.com F1 to H1.htm. You can get to it by Google as well. If you're on F1 status and you're interested in cap gap, just take a look at this article and it'll tell you exactly what happens to you at different stages in the process in your cap gap. Okay. All right, so that's really what's happening with the cap filing that's coming up this March, right? There was a rule recently that many of you heard about to change the H1b cap system to prefer high wage earners. Okay, and that's this one. I'll take you to it. This rule came out right at it's called a midnight regulation, right? As the Trump administration was on its way out, they had all these different immigration policies that they didn't get a chance to implement. So there was a flurry of last-minute rules and regulations that they put out, and this is one of them. All right, so this is a rule that basically changes the lottery system. So right now, as I said, it's a random selection, right? This would change the system to prefer high wage earners. So anyone that's filing under a level 4 wage under the OES system, they have almost a certain shot of getting picked. Level 3, a little bit less likely. Level 2, less likely. And level 1 is almost no chance. This is based on our predictions of how many cases are going to be filed. So in effect, if you want to get an H1b Cap, you need to be getting paid a high salary. That's what this system would do. Now, because this was a midnight regulation, the Biden administration on day one, it put out executive orders and memos delaying many of these rules. So this rule will not be in effect this cap season. So this cap season will be exactly the same as last cap season, as I mentioned. This rule is now being pushed to December 31st. So next year, 2022, it may be in effect. We'll know more, obviously, as time goes by, because the rule has some legal infirmities. It doesn't abide by the Immigration Nationality Act, the statute that kind of put all this into play. So there's some court challenges, basically. So we'll see if, when next year comes around, if this rule is actually in effect. So as of now, this year's cap season definitely will be just like last year. There's no preference for high wage earners. It's a random lottery. Next year may or may not have a requirement that you basically file under level 4 wages to have any shot at the lottery. As I said, there's some court cases that are going to determine the outcome on that. All right, so that's the H1 cap. Now, getting back to the Biden administration. So one of the most, in his first day, there was dozens of orders that were implemented, many of them on immigration. One of the most consequential, especially for our community, is that the Buy American, Hire American order was repealed. Okay, this was an order that Trump put out a few years ago that basically caused a lot of havoc for people that have filed H1 and employment-based green cards. So all of the RFEs, the level 1 RFEs, the approval notice for 1 or 2 days, the very long employer control RFEs, special occupation RFEs, everything under the sun that we've seen the last couple of years, that was all based on this one order. Okay, the order directed DHS, Department of Labor, to basically clamp down the screws on immigration, employment immigration specifically. So it's good that order has been repealed. And as I said, there's many other orders that Biden has also put out. And I'll quickly summarize those. And again, this is on our website. And a lot of these orders were very, very much needed, okay, because some of these were inhumane, especially relating to asylum and the border policy, separation of children at the border, things that we've been reading about in the news. So through his executive orders and proclamations, he's revoked the Muslim and African travel bans. Okay, there's a 100-day pause on deportations. The border wall construction has been halted. It's a boondoggle, a waste of money. He's put in procedures to increase accountability at ICE and CBP. He's ended the inhumane childhood separation policy that we've been reading about for the last 2 years. The census now has to include all people regardless of immigration status. Syrian TPS is extended by 18 months, and the DACA program is now protected. Again, the administration was slowly cutting away at the DACA program, but that's now protected under executive order, right? So these are all very good executive orders that he's put into place. One important order that he has not put into place, unfortunately, is that he has not repealed proclamations 10014 and 10052. These are basically what you can call the green card and H1 visa stamping bans. Okay, these bans say something very particular. What they say is, if you are not in the United States on June 24th, 2020, and you didn't already have a visa stamp on that date, then they're not going to stamp your H1 visa until the order expires, which is on March 31st. Okay, and the green card version of that is, unless it's an immediate relative category case, if you're going through green card processing at the consulate, you're also going to have to wait. Now, there's many exemptions to that. The most important of which I already mentioned, which is June 24th. If you're in the US on June 24th, 2020, this does not apply to you. Okay, and if you're going for H4 stamping and your spouse was here on June 24th, again, it doesn't apply to you. So this is the most, for people that are already here, for the most part, they don't have to worry about this. It's more of a concern for people that are first-time stampers, or people that have been in India for a long time. For whatever reason, they were not in the US on June 24th. So for those people, there's national interest exemptions. So the procedure is still the same. You still apply for an H or L or J visa or your immigrant visa as normal. But when you go for your interview, you have to show that you qualify under one of these national interest exemptions. Again, this is if you were not here in the US on June 24th, 2020, right? And I'll take you to what the national interest exemptions cover. And it's many different requirements depending on the category, and you can see it here on this Department of State website. But basically, it's national interest. So it's, what it boils down to is, I have a very important position. My employer is going to suffer if I'm not back in the US working for the company. The work that I'm doing helps the economy. It's important for COVID-19, right? There's different factors here. So for the H1 exemption, you have to meet 2 out of the 5 factors. For H2B, there's different requirements. J, there's different requirements. L, there's different requirements, right? So all the categories have national interest exemptions, and they're all listed on this site. Important, as I mentioned, the H4, the dependents, right? So if you're a dependent and your spouse is exempt, then you're exempt. Okay, and again, that's very helpful because people that are here on June 24th, as you see here, the entire family is exempt from the ban, so they can come and get stamping. And I should add that these bans are only in effect through March 31st, right? We're already at February 17th, so another 45 days or so. There's been push for Biden to repeal these orders. He hasn't done it yet. It's actually been pretty surprising that he hasn't done it yet. So assuming he doesn't do it, doesn't repeal, it's only another month and a half before this is done. The broader issue is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Obviously, we're all affected by that. Vaccinations are going, but they're slow. Because of that, there's big backlogs at the consulates. And when you're applying for and travel, it has many restrictions as well. And I'll quickly show you something that I received today. If you go to this website, this is the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. They've put out an interesting algorithm for those of you who are computer science savvy. This algorithm basically tells you what your restrictions are on international travel. And this has been making the rounds on social media. Some of you may have gotten this as well. You can get this, and this is official because this is on the Government of India's website at this URL, as you can see. All right, so take a look at this if you are planning to travel. But obviously, the concern is with travel restrictions on the one hand. Also, there's big backlogs at the consulates in India for visa appointment times. Now, one kind of insider tip, when you log into the site, it's going to tell you that there's no appointments available until November. But when you actually go through and pay the fee bill and keep checking back, you'll see that appointments open up randomly. And people have been getting appointments even in February. I'm hearing some feedback.
Can you, Oscar, can you mute all the lines except Akshat's, please?
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the situation with the visa stamping. You know, in short, if you may be exempt already, but if you're not, you can apply for one of these national interest exemptions. You should get the help of an attorney because, as you can see, you know, there's pretty extensive requirements. There's some legal reasoning involved here. But you can apply for that. And, you know, if you want to wait until after March 31st, you can do that. Biden is definitely not extending these orders. I'm going to say that with 99% certainty. You know, you never know, but he's almost certainly not going to extend it. So it's really just till the end of March. And the other issue is with the stamping appointments. If you go through the system and keep trying, you will find that we've been hearing that people are getting appointments relatively soon. They're not having to wait until November. Okay. So that's the situation with stamping. Now, there have been some other changes also on the H1b program. A couple of them were blocked in court. So towards the end of last year, USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Labor, they kind of did a tag team job where they changed the H1B system in a couple of important ways. One is that the Department of Labor significantly bumped up the prevailing wage methodologies. So most people that file H1, they use the Department of Labor's wage system, right? And the wage system may say, okay, you're in Exton, Pennsylvania, you're a programmer, level 1 wage is $55,000, level 2 wage is $70,000, and so on. What the Department of Labor did is they changed the methodology so that a level 1 wage was now $80,000, level 2 is now $100,000, right? A big jump, kind of inconsistent with the market reality for like a fresher. They're not getting paid $80,000, $90,000. It doesn't matter what your status is. That's just the market reality. So the courts, this was challenged. It was blocked by the courts. It was overturned by the courts. So what the administration has done is they came up with another version of the rule. Okay, that's not as extreme. Okay, and I'll take you to that. Well, anyway, so let me take you to that 1 second. Okay, so under the new Department of Labor wage system, right, you're going to see increases in wages, but it's staggered. Okay, and you can see it on our website, thewire.com/news.htm, under the January 14th entry. Okay, and for those of you online, you can see the summary here. So basically, right now the level 1 wage is at the 17th percentile among all the different wages in each category. It's now going to be at the 35th percentile. Level 2 is going from 34 to 53, and so on. So there is some bumping up that's happening, but it's being transitioned in. Right, so the new wages go into effect July 1st, 2022. Before the year before that, the new wages are at 90% of those levels. And from now until June 30th of this year, there's no change. Right, so this is kind of a forward-looking thing. This also is going to be challenged in court. Again, for not staying close to the language of the INA. Like I said, an earlier version of this was challenged in court and canceled by the court, and we're expecting hopefully that kind of action to happen on this version as well. But assuming that it stays, this is what the rule is. So in a couple of years, 2022, there's going to be a bump in the wages. It's not going to be as stark as the last version, which was repealed, but it is going to be significant. And I should add also that there's some other exemptions for people that are already here and have I-140s, right? So to look at that, this is the rule here. We have a link on it. We have it on our website. It's a long rule, 247 pages, but you know, the bottom line here is that it's going to in effect in a couple of years. And there is going to be court challenges against it. So that's something to watch out for. No immediate impact on that right now, as I said, at least through July. It doesn't affect anyone. Right. Another thing is actually the community dodged a bullet with this one. There was a rule that was finalized, all set to go into effect. It's called the Strengthening the H1b Non-Immigrant Classification Program. This one has been withdrawn. So as I said, the Trump administration put out all of these midnight regulations, right? Last minute rule changes. And the Biden administration delayed or withdrew many of these rules, all right? And this one was completely withdrawn. So it's not anything to worry about. But I'll just tell you why it was something to worry about before. So as many of you know, last 10 years, that's pretty much since January 2010, when the so-called Neufeld memo came out, there's been a lot more scrutiny by USCIS for IT companies especially. If you're working at some third-party site, USCIS basically does not like that. They think that there's high levels of fraud in the industry. So they have wanted for the last 10 plus years, very extensive documentation that you're actually going to be employed, right? So if you're working in a consulting company, the consulting company supervises you, right? It's not just a pass-through entity. You have an employer handbook, you have training, maybe company holiday party, things like that, things that a regular company would have, right? So that's what USCIS is trying to get at. And for 10 years, that was the norm, right? Client letters were required, purchase orders were required, and the scrutiny kept on increasing and increasing. And after the Buy American, Hire American order, as I mentioned before, USCIS started really increasing the RFE rate. It was almost 70, 80% at one point, RFE rate. The approval rate went down from about nationwide from about 95% in some months down to about 75%. It's still pretty good, but if you're in that 25%, you're not happy, right? Your case was denied when it would not have been just a year earlier. As I said, also that we were seeing approval notices for 1 or 2 days, backdated approval notices. So now, you get an approval notice today, but it says that your status ended 2 months ago. We were seeing that kind of thing. And, there were more denials and RFEs under the so-called specialty occupation category, which is specialty occupation basically means H1b. And USCIS has always questioned, okay, if you're filing for an H1b, is the job a specialty occupation? Is the job something that requires a specific bachelor's degree, right? So there's always been RFEs and questions on that, because that's what H1b is. But that kind of RFE increased after the Buy American, Hire American order. So all these hurdles were being thrown at us, the attorneys and the community. Ultimately, ITServe, the consulting organization, filed a bunch of lawsuits against USCIS, and they won several of them. And that culminated in a settlement. We call it the ITServe settlement. And basically, under that settlement, USCIS withdrew many of these new policy changes. So the Neufeld memo was withdrawn. The policy of 1 or 2 day approvals, that was withdrawn. And we were all very happy about that. And many of you would have known about that as well. Now the concern, and my concern, and many attorneys' concern at that time was, okay, they have this settlement, they've withdrawn these things, but we know that they're going to issue a new rule re-implementing these things. And the reason for that is the reason why the ITServe lawsuits won was because the way that USCIS was implementing that change was not through the proper channels. They didn't go through notice and comment. They didn't issue final rulemakings. They kind of just issued, to some extent, they didn't even issue memos. They just said, we're going to do more cases internally, and that's what happened. And the U.S. is a nation of laws. You can't just change the law without going through the proper procedures. And that's what the courts were saying. So that's why DHS and USCIS lost all those lawsuits. If they had implemented the employer control and the higher specialty occupation requirements and the shorter approval notice durations, if they did all those things through notice and comment, if they did those things through the proper channels, it would have been very difficult to challenge that in court, because the courts grant a high level of deference to regulatory agencies. They say, well, you're in charge of immigration, we kind of trust you. So as long as you go through the right steps, most cases we're not going to overturn your judgment. So when the IT service settlement came out last year in the summer, we were all happy, but we kind of were scared. Okay, now what's going to happen? Are they going to come out with a rule, go through the proper channels, and then it'll be very difficult to challenge? And that's actually what they did. They came out with this rule, strengthening the H1b non-immigrant visa classification program. Fortunately, knock on wood, they delayed. They didn't get around to it until December, January. It was already published by the time Joe Biden took over, but it was not implemented yet. And Joe Biden had a policy of a blanket policy. Any rule that's published but not implemented is hereby withdrawn. Okay, so that rule now is done. And not a lot of people know about it, but it's really a good thing, because that would have ended the H1B program to some extent, especially for IT companies. The other good thing is that the Biden administration has put in a lot of pro-immigration leadership at USCIS. So we're not expecting a new version of that rule to come out, at least in the next 4 years. So that's another good thing. Another midnight regulation that Trump tried to push through, he just didn't get around to it, but it was in the process at OMB, was a proposal to end the H4 EAD program. So as you all know, that's been something that the administration has been talking about for years, ever since Trump took over. They've been threatening to end the H4 EAD program. They actually started that process, but they didn't finish it. They didn't get around to doing it, and Biden killed that as well. All right, so that's also some good news. So looking ahead, what does that mean for the H1B program? Where are we with the H1B program? A quick summary. So for the H1b Cap, as I said, it's the same as last year. There's no wage preference. We may see that next year. The H1b visa stamping ban is still in effect. It expires the end of March. There's some exemptions that if you are subject to it, you should be aware of. The most important, again, is the one for June 24th. Anyone that was here on that day doesn't have to worry about this. Despite COVID, the consulates are accepting appointments. There is some delay. You have to go through the website multiple times, but you should be able to find appointments. The wage system that DOL puts out is going to be increasing effective July, slowly. And as I said, the full wage changes will be in effect in 2 years, but we're expecting some court challenge on that. And some very scary programs to end the H4 EAD and also re-implement the employer control requirements, which were published in January, are not in effect now. And as I said, that was one of the things I'll tell you is that if you're working at a third-party site, what that rule said is that, say you're working at Vanguard, we mentioned Vanguard. The IT company is the employer, the employee is working at Vanguard through 2 or 3 vendors. Under that rule, the end client Vanguard would have to file an H1B petition, and the IT company would have to file a concurrent H1B petition. Now, that would basically kill the IT industry completely, because obviously Vanguard is not going to file an H1B petition. If it is, they don't need the IT company, right? Why would they do that? So again, that was withdrawn, thankfully, just in the nick of time, actually. All right, so what does the Biden administration have in store for the H1B program looking ahead? Well, one interesting component is that in their policy statements, they have said that they prefer changing the cap system to give higher preference to high wage earners, okay? So that rule, which goes into effect December 31st, changing the cap to basically require level 4 wages, that may survive the administration, right? Because at least from what we know, the Biden administration favors that kind of rule change. It may or may not survive the court challenge. That we'll have to see. But Biden seems to be in favor of that, from what we gather. Okay. This week, you should be reading in the news that Biden has an extensive immigration plan, right? It's called the Citizenship Act, and it covers many, many things. It covers giving a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented people. This is something that hasn't happened in, since the 80s. The Dreamers are going to be given a pathway to citizenship as well. For our community, especially, many of you know about S386 and HR 1044, which is a repeal of the visa per country visa caps. Bills to that effect passed in December, but they were not reconciled in time. They were not added to the budget. So those bills basically died, right? And the per country caps are important because that's what's keeping people from India and China waiting here for their green cards for 10, 20, 30 years. Once that system is repealed, or if that system is repealed, then Indians and Chinese are not going to have to wait that long. They'll have to wait pretty much the same time as everyone else. Now, there's a mediated approach where it's staggered in, but effectively the wait times will be much less. Unfortunately, that bill, though it passed both House and Senate, was not reconciled, as I said, it was not passed. But the Biden plan does contain a repeal of the per country caps. Okay, so if that component at least passes, it's going to be huge for our community. We're going to be getting green cards at a much faster rate. You hear all these horror stories of kids that are aging out. They speak with an American accent like me, although I was born in India. I came here at age 7, but they're effectively Americans. They don't know what it's like to be in India. They don't want to go back, but they're going to age out because of the backlogs. And if the per country caps are repealed, then they would have a solution. And the Biden plan, which again is going to be presented to Congress this week, does contain a repeal of the per country caps. So the same thing as S386 and HR 1044 from December. What's interesting is that the Biden plan actually goes beyond S386. It's actually a great bill. It repeals the per country caps, but it also excludes dependents from the count, from the immigrant visa count, the numbers. And it reclaims unused numbers. There's tens of thousands of numbers, hundreds of thousands from the last 20 years. So it adds all those numbers back to the queue as well. So the versions of the S386 and 1044, they didn't necessarily do that. So this plan, if it goes through, is actually going to jump up the bulletin pretty significantly. Will it pass? Now that's the question. Because Biden has a comprehensive immigration plan that includes so-called amnesty for undocumented people, there's very strong Republican opposition to it. Obviously, the Senate is pretty much 51% Democrat. So unless at least 9 Republicans join in, the full comprehensive immigration bill is probably not going to pass. But that said, components of the bill may have a better chance, especially the S386 version that I talked about, because as I said, that already passed House and Senate last year. More Democrats favor it than Republicans, and it's a Democrat-controlled House this time. So I think if the bill is split up to have that component considered separately, I think chances of passage are higher on that. So that's something we'll have to see. There's nothing in the Biden bill increasing the H1b visa numbers, unfortunately. So that's going to continue as is. But on the green card side, that's a big help for a lot of people that have been waiting. So I think that pretty much covers what we wanted to discuss today. I think that should give you a sense of where the H1b program is today and where it may be in the near future. As I said, the Biden bill is really the most interesting thing that's before us right now. And it's an evolving situation, you know, and it's interesting because Republicans in the past have been pro-business, but there's a strong, you know, the party has changed. It's now quite anti-immigrant as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how much support on the Republican side the supporters of these bills can get, because that's going to make a big difference. There is a process, as many of you know, called budget reconciliation, where bills can get passed with just 51 votes in the Senate. But budget reconciliation has to relate to the budget. And most of the things relating to immigration aren't related to the budget. There may be like an exemption for essential workers working in COVID, that kind of thing that could get under budget reconciliation. But for the most part, we're going to need at least 60 votes to get any immigration components passed. So hopefully if the per country visa component is decided separately, that I think has a pretty good chance of passing. And if it does, then, you know, people's wait times are going to come down from 30, 40 years to 2 or 3 years. All right, so I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to discuss. We can now look at the questions and answers.
Yeah. Hey, Vamshi,
yeah.
you want to call down the question and
Sure.
answer?
Yep. Wow. Wonderful. I mean, it's a valuable insight. So we have a few questions here, Mr. Tiwari. The first question one of our attendees has posted is, any changes to Department of Labor, PWD, and perm processing time?
Yes, good question.
Can
The
we
perm
go?
process has not changed. There's been no rules or proposals to change that at all. Compared to say 10 years ago, when I started practicing 15 years ago, the perm process had just been put into effect, and the cases were taking longer. There were more audits, more denials. These days, for the last 5 years or so, it's been pretty good, and I have not seen any changes for the worse on that recently. So it's still taking, you know, maybe 2 to 4 months for a decision on perm. There's not been any changes in that regard.
Yeah, the question is, can we be a part of an LLC company when you are on H1?
You can own stock. You can own anything while you're on H1b. So just like you can go and buy a share of Microsoft while you're on H1b, you can own a component of an LLC, small company, instead of a big company. What you cannot do is work for the company unless you have work authorization, where the H1b comes in. So if you're, it's an LLC, LLCs have members and managers. Managers manage, they run the company. Members are like shareholders. So you can be a member, but you cannot be a manager. And if it's a single member LLC, that also is not allowed, because if it's a single member LLC, then you're also the manager, right? Who's running the company if it's not you?
Yeah,
So
that means instead of LLC, he can go with a corporation. The LLC is like individual entity, right?
yeah, I mean, the rule is the same whether it's LLC or corporation. You can own, but you can't work. You can't manage.
Okay, gotcha. Mhm.
Okay. The second question I have is another attendee has asked, how long I can be on unemployment on H1B? I think looks like the individual has recently, but they needed to know how long they can be on unemployment on H1B.
Sure.
Recently, their contract is ended. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, many people are on the bench, and even, you know, the rule is even if you're on the bench, you should be getting paid by your employer, right? This benching is not allowed, as we all know. But even so, since about 3 years now, 2017, there's a 60-day grace period for lack of pay stubs. That's how you can think of it. So normally you need to have pay stubs to maintain H1B status, right? You can go on bona fide leave if it's for your own benefit, like maternity or even some travel. But the time period there has to be reasonable. So you can't say I'm traveling for 6 months while on H1B, right? But you can go on maternity for 6 months, especially if you have complications, things like that. But if you're not on leave and you're working, then you need to have pay stubs in order to maintain status, as we all know. What the rule from January 2017 says is that per approval notice, you're given 60 days of up to 60 days of consecutive days without pay stubs. That's how you can think of it. So say you're on H1 now, your H1 is valid until December 31st, 2021. You're not getting paid. Your employer is ready to lay you off. They do that today. You now have 60 days to file a transfer and start working once the receipt is issued with the new company.
Yeah. The next question is, my visa extension is denied in last year, and I am back to India on June 23rd, 2020. Can I file another petition through new company under no cap exemption?
Yes, as long as you have some time left in your 6-year allocation, you're cap exempt. What you have to worry about in your case is the proclamation. But in any case, if you're filing a case now, by the time it goes to USCIS, LCA takes 7 days. Even under premium, it's going to take 2 weeks. By the time you get the appointment, it would probably be in April anyway, so maybe that's not a concern. But to answer your question, you are cap exempt, as long as you have time left in your 6 years.
Okay. Next question is, can you file no cap petition under consular processing and attend visa interview after March 31st, 2021?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yep. So,
And there is one question related to H4 EAD. So H4 and H4 EAD approvals taking longer than expected time. So is there any way to expedite the H4 process or
Yeah,
H4 EAD process?
yeah, that's a big concern right now because for many reasons. One is COVID, obviously. Everyone's processes have been slowed. Another issue is that in October 2020, as many of you know, the visa dates bumped up significantly. There was, thousands, probably tens of thousands of applications that were filed in October itself. Because of that, there's a huge backlog, especially at the Texas Service Center. And they just don't have the manpower. They're already undermanned due to COVID. Now they have all those cases to process. So the manpower problems are leading to big, big delays. I mean, not to excuse USCIS because, they've gotten extra money. They claim to be having a budget shortfall, but the data actually shows they're doing fine. But unfortunately, what that means is that processing, especially for H4 and EAD 765, has gotten worse. It used to be 3 months. You get an EAD in 3 months. Now it's more, we say 4 to 6 months. Specifically for H4 EAD, what the USCIS has said is they reserve the right not to even adjudicate your EAD until your H4 is approved. Okay, so if the H4 is taking 3 to 6 months, they may say, okay, get the H4 approved first, then we'll look at the H4 EAD application. Now, in practice, they have not done that, but on all their guidance, they've said they reserve the right to do that. So that kind of gives them cover to also take more time. Another complication is now another dumb policy from the Trump administration is that, the vast majority of applications now require biometrics. H1 doesn't, but H4 does, right? So now biometrics means going into the office. Now you want to go into the office with COVID and all these restrictions. There's a huge backlog. There's currently a billion people backlog. I'm sorry, not billion, a million person backlog for biometrics at USCIS. Okay, and they're processing 10,000 biometrics per day. So you do the math and you see how long it takes for biometrics. It's not going to get better anytime soon, unfortunately. which explains why there's such a long delay for the H4 EAD, because the H4 requires biometrics, and there's a backlog for biometrics. So strategy to improve that, the best I can say is file your H4 and your H4 EAD along with an H1b that's filed under premium processing. If you do that, we have seen faster processing, at least on the H4 component. Now the case is still going to go to biometrics, but especially if you had biometrics already, USCIS is waiving the biometrics in many cases. So you may skip out on that delay altogether. And then, if it's H1 premium, that part gets approved in 2 weeks. If they reuse your biometrics, then you're fine there. And then you're really just looking at the 3 to 6 months on the H4 EAD. So the best guidance I can give is to file your H4 EAD along with an H1 petition that's filed under premium. And if it's not time for an extension on the H1, you can file an amendment based on some change, such as salary or job location, things like that.
Wonderful. I think the other question from our attendees is, what are the major changes, favorable, unfavorable conditions when compared to previous years?
Yeah, it's the bottom line is it's a lot more favorable. That's really what we were talking about throughout the whole course of the program. But
That's like
most of the troubling changes have either been repealed or struck down in court. The source of many of those is the Buy American, Hire American order, which is now canceled. So I am expecting better times going forward.
Yeah, and there is
Wonderful.
one more question. How long will take I-485 EAD processing time in the present situation? The current
Same as the H4 EAD. The 485 process also requires, the 765 also requires the fingerprinting, and that has a backlog, as I mentioned. So, they say 3 months in theory, but it's probably closer to 6 months. That said, I have seen some cases from October that we filed have already gotten EADs as well. So
Yeah.
it's less than 6 months. So it's, it's going to change. But as I said, about 4 to 6 months is a reasonable target right now.
I think the next follow-up question is kind of an attachment, like similar to the previous question, but we'll still have it. Will the new administration help to reduce the EAD processing time? We have applied for L2 EAD 6 months ago. No updates till now.
Yeah, that's tough. Many people are stuck in the situation where they're losing their jobs because of delay. There's no good reason. And it's actually kind of funny if you look at the Twitter account for USCIS. If you want to laugh, just look at their Twitter account. What happens is that they issue these kind of marketing PR tweets saying, "Oh, USCIS is working hard, and we granted this person citizenship today." And if you look at all the comments, they all say, "Do something about the backlog. Do something about the backlog," even though it's not related to the tweet. So many people are affected by this, and they're worried about it. The good thing is that, among immigration attorneys, we feel that the backlogs and the delays were a deliberate policy choice as part of the, Trump administration's general sort of demeanor towards immigration to slow it down. We think that this was not done accidentally, and we think this was an actual policy choice. And you saw that with the fiasco where they claimed that they didn't have enough money last year, and then Pramila Jayapal and others looked at their finances and said, you actually have plenty of money. So because the new administration has put in Alejandro Mayorkas and many others who are very pro-immigrant, they want to improve the system. They want to get more benefits out. I think that things should improve. The COVID-19 is still an issue, even if they have the best of intentions, that's still a restriction.
Yeah.
But it can only get better from here. I don't think it'll get worse.
Yeah. The next question is, Tiwari, as per the current situation, how long it will take take to file and get approval for labor and I-140, like applying the green card process from the scratch. Yeah.
Yeah, labor I-140 I think has not changed really since last couple of years, fortunately. I-140 you can still do under premium, so that's 2 weeks. Labor, as I said, we're getting it in 3-4 months, so that's a good news on that side.
Wonderful. Another question is, what could be expected under Biden administration in EB-1A and EB-1B approval rate?
I would not expect very big changes on that. Those are very difficult categories, obviously, especially the first one, EB-1, extraordinary ability. You know, the law on that has not changed in a long time. There's been some court cases that increase the requirements. So it's a multi-factor test, right? It'll say you have to meet X number out of 10 factors. And essentially, there was a ruling recently, a couple of years ago now, that said you have to meet pretty much all the factors. It's a totality of the evidence standard. So even if you just meet a couple, that we're going to look to see whether you meet more than a couple, despite what the regulation says. I don't think that's a priority for the Biden administration, so I wouldn't expect that to change. It may, but I'm sure that's very low on the priority list for the administration.
Okay.
Our next question is, once we receive EAD, can the dependent start using the GC EAD while primary stays on H1? If so, will the dependent be able to switch back to H4 in case of any issues?
Well, once you use your EAD, if it's not an H4 EAD, once you use your 485 EAD, you're not in H4 status anymore. You've fallen out of H4 status. So once you've fallen out of H4 status, you can't change your status to F1 or even extend your H4 status. You're in the country based on your pending 485, and you're working based on the EAD. Now that said, if you do use the EAD, USCIS may not know that you used it, right? Because when you use it, all you're doing is you're filing an I-9 that the company is keeping in their records to show that this is how you're working based on the EAD. So it's not like you have to maintain pay stubs while you're on H4. So you can still try for an H4 extension or a change of status. USCIS may not know that you used the 485 EAD, but technically speaking, once you use the 485 EAD, you've fallen out of H4 status.
Wonderful. Our next question is, my project ends on June 30th, 2021, and I'm planning to travel India for first time H1b visa stamping. Will there be any issues as my project ends in 2 months from April?
Yeah, the visa stamping ban should definitely not be in effect by that time, so I wouldn't worry about that. The things to worry about are whether you can get an appointment, which again, they are available somewhat surprisingly. And also the usual issues with visa stamping. So especially if it's an IT company, you want to be sure that you've documented that there's work available. Despite the IT serve settlement, especially at the consulates, they're still asking for project documentation, things like that. So it's the same way it's always been for the last few years.
Okay. Wonderful. I think we have one last question for tonight. How do we know if USCIS already has our biometrics or not? Ideally, they do, because we would have given them during stamping. Trying to understand under what conditions we may get an exemption during H4 extension.
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer to that is kind of like astronomy. Can you look into what's happening inside a black hole? As you approach a black hole, light cannot escape, and USCIS is really like that as well. Their policy is that, yes, they want to reuse biometrics. Whether they will do that in your case or not, whether your file in particular is in queue for reusing of biometrics, that's unknown. But I think as the new administration does want to reduce the backlog, and reusing biometrics is a stated policy, I think you can be hopeful that that would happen in your case, but there's no way to know about it.
Mr. Tiwari, we have some more, couple of more questions actually came in just right now. Our next question is there any changes in filing the H1b petition this year?
The cap, if it's about the cap, the answer is no. And even non-cap, it's pretty much the same as last year. Well, let's say if it's non-cap, it's the same as late last year after the IT serve settlement was in effect, which is good.
Another question is, I was with a company and my visa is stamped A company until November 21st, 2021. Maybe it is 2020, I guess. On Jan 30, 2021, I have joined a new company. My H1B transfer is in progress. Can I travel to India and come back to US with new I-797 without visa stamping, as my visa is valid? Oh, visa is valid till November 20, 2021. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, you can. You can use the visa and the approval notice from the new company. In fact, you can even, under AC-21 portability, you can even travel using a receipt notice for the new company, approval notice for the old company, and the visa stamp for the old company. But probably want to wait if it's a transfer situation. Wait until you get the approval, and then you can use that existing visa.
Okay, wonderful. Another question is from a student. Looks like currently I'm on OPT. If I get my H1B picked and approved this year, can I freeze my H1B and activate it later when I need it?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I was alluding to this earlier. I think if you need cap gap, you should definitely file as a change of status. If you don't need cap gap and you have time left on your F1, I think it makes sense to file your case under consular processing. What that means is that if your case is approved, good, you have pretty much 3 years to go and get a visa stamp and come back when you like. In the meantime, you continue to stay on F1 status. So you can effectively freeze your H1B and use it when you need by filing consular processing.
That's wonderful.
Vamshi, we need to wind up the call. So
Yeah, we have, I think, just last 2 questions. Quickly, we can wind it up.
yeah.
One, it's been 333 days. My amendment case was received. When I contacted USCIS, they replied like, your case is on processing hold because of required security checks remain pending. What does security checks mean?
Yeah, this is another black hole question. Security check, it could mean anything, really. What I would suggest in that case, if it's an amendment, the thing you have to worry about is your I-94 end date, right? So if the end date is coming up soon, you want to file another petition, file another amendment plus extension as soon as you can. If you have plenty of time left, then maybe, don't worry about it, because while the amendment is pending, you're allowed to work at the new work site that was listed on the amendment. Security check could mean, if you have some criminal history, then it's probably relating to that. If you don't, then it could just be that someone with your same name has some criminal history, something like that. Security check is kind of a catch-all term, though. We have no visibility on what that actually means. But a good solution in that situation, it's been almost a year, is basically file another case. File another case, do it under premium, and maybe this one will escape the security check.
Okay. I think one last question, sir. How many visa numbers will be available by October 2021? Due to family-based EO and consulate close, do you know EB3 movement in October 2021?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because the reason why the numbers jumped in October 2020, many people know, is because of COVID. So due to COVID, all the consulates were shut down. There are many immigrant visa numbers that were not used last summer, and all those numbers were now available. So then USCIS kind of reclaimed them and allowed for the more 45 filings. They jumped up the priority dates, but they knew there were going to be more 45 filings. That may happen again this year because, again, the consulates, they're not shut down as they were last year, but processing is a lot slower. And many immigrant visa numbers are going unused again. So I do expect a jump in the dates in October. I don't think it'll be as big of a jump as last year, but there should be some forward progress. Now, whether EB3 is more favorable than EB2, that remains to be seen. Many people downgraded their cases to EB3 because EB3 was more favorable, and it continues to be. But if you look at the Chinese dates from about 2010 or so, the Chinese visa bulletin also had a flip between EB2 and EB3, where EB2 was slower than was actually more favorable. EB2 was more favorable than EB3, or rather, EB3 was more favorable than EB2 because there are many EB2 filings by Chinese people.
Yeah.
But that eventually equalized so that EB2 is now better than EB3, as is the norm. So I am expecting that to happen also with the Indian visa bulletin, but it may take some time to do that. So I am expecting a jump this October. Now, assuming, if that 386 bill passes, that's going to be a big jump, a big jump. I mean, many dates are going to be current even, I expect. But if the bill doesn't pass, despite that, I still expect there to be a jump, maybe not as much as last year, but there will be. The question asked, the number, that's impossible for me to guess, but I would say maybe half of what it was last year. Just gauging, how the pandemic has been affecting us this year as compared to last year.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tiwari, for taking time and sharing your valuable insight with us. And at this moment, I would like to even take a moment and thank our advisory council team, Dr. Palamala Reddy, founder, Vijaypal Reddy, chair, and Dr. Harnath Pochela, co-chair, and our executive committee, Dr. Ramon Potlala, president, Vamshi Reddy, president-elect, Suresh Reddy Venkanagiri, executive vice president, Srinivas Manapargada, general secretary, Venkat Gaddam, executive director, Pawan Rava, a treasurer, and our Kavita Reddy, joint secretary, Harinder Talapalli, joint treasurer, Venkat Ekka, national executive coordinator, Naveen Goli, international vice president, Narsimha Dantreddy, media and communication director, Madhavi Soleti, ethics committee coordinator, and Bharat Matari, our past president. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining this call and making it a great success. Telangana American Telugu Association frequently organizes such useful webinars. Please visit our organization website, mytelanganaus.org, for upcoming events. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you for the talk, team.
Yeah,
That was a
please
great
refer
webinar.
to Akshat Tiwari if you have any questions, and
I'll give you more.
happy, thanks a lot, Akshat Tiwari.
Thank you, Akshat.
Thank you. Thank you,
so much for
Akshat.
your valuable time.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Warm, everyone.
Thank you, Vamshi.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Thank you,
Good.
Vamshi and
One more
Bhaskar,
session
for
is
your time.
Suresh bhai, I will close this session, and they will launch the they will open that other session, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.